I think it's become quite apparent that there's an evolution underway in model architecture. And I think you may remember we talked about this briefly with Sam last week, but we're moving away from these very big, bulky models that are released every couple of months or quarters and cost a lot of money to rebuild every time they get re-released, towards a system of models. This multimodal system basically leverages several models at once that work together or that are linked together to respond to the inputs and to provide some generative output, and that those individual models themselves can be continuously tuned and or continuously updated, rather than have, hey, there's this big new release that just happened, this new model just got trained, cost $10 million to train it, it's been pushed. These models can be upgraded with tuning, with upgrade features, and then linked together with other new, smaller models that are perhaps specialized for specific tasks, like doing mathematics or rendering an image or rendering a movie. And so I think what we're going to see is soon more of an obfuscation of the individual models and more of this general service type approach where the updates are happening in a more continuous fashion. I think this is the first step of OpenAI taking that architectural approach with GPT-4o. And what's behind the curtains, we don't know. We don't know how many models are there. We don't know how frequently they're being changed, whether they're being changed through actually upgrading the parameters or whether they're being fine-tuned. And so this seems to be pretty obvious. If you look at this link, one of the criticisms that initially came out when they released GPT-4o was that there was some performance degradation. And Stanford actually runs this massive multitask language understanding assessment. And they publish it, I think, daily or pretty frequently on how all the models perform. And you can see the scorecard here that GPT-4o actually outperforms GPT-4. And so this goes counter to some of the narrative that in order to get some of the performance improvements and speed improvements they got in 4o, that they actually made the model worse. That it seems actually the opposite is true, that the model's gotten slightly better. It still underperforms Cloud 3 Opus, which you can see here ranks top of these charts. But there's lots of different charts. All the companies publish their own charts. They all claim that they're better than everyone else. But I like Stanford because it's independent.
Chamath, any thoughts after seeing it and in combination with our interview? Do you think ChatGPT is running away with the consumer experience, or do you think this is like neck and neck with some of the other players?
Not to tell tales out of school, but somebody that we all know in our group chat posted something about the fact that the consumer growth had stalled. I don't know how they knew that maybe they got some data, or maybe they're an investor. You guys know what I'm talking about. And they said that they're trying to reinvigorate growth into the consumer app at OpenAI. I mean,
any
I think this
insights as to why it might be plateauing in your perspective?
I wrote this in my annual letter, but there are these phases of growth. And when you look at like social networks as a perfect example, Friendster was magical when it was first created, right? And then you had MySpace that just ran circles around them because Friendster didn't really invest the money and the quality that it took to create a moat. And then MySpace really wasn't able to compete. So we were, Facebook, we were the 8th or 9th when we showed up on the scene, and we ran circles around everybody. I think what it means is that there are these phases of product development which exist in many markets. This market, I think, is going through the same thing. And right now we're in the first, what I would call primordial ooze phase, which is everybody's kind of like running around like a chicken with their heads cut off. There's all these core basic capabilities that are still so magical when you see them. But we all know that 5 and 10 years from now, these things will be table stakes, right? And what Freeberg just showed is a table of many companies and many trillions of market cap, all effectively running to the same destination. So I think where we are is probably within 2 years of where the basic building blocks are standardized. And then I think the real businesses get built. So I will maintain my perspective here, which is the quote unquote Facebook of AI has yet to be created.
These new models are so much more efficient that you actually can throw the old model in the garbage. Because it's so inefficient. And these are now becoming about 90% cheaper every year, which means every 2 years, these things are going to be 99% cheaper and better.
Yep.
And it might
Pretty
be
amazing,
that OpenAI, Sachs, on a strategic level, is going to make all this free or close to free, and maybe just charge for a multiplayer version That seems to be where it's heading. You don't have to log in to use 3.5.
GPT-4o is a really important innovation. By the way, the O stands for Omni, which I think stands for omni-channel. One is omni-channel, which means text, audio, video, and images. Second, it's more conversational. Like it understands the tone of people talking. It understands sort of sentiment in a way it didn't before. And then the third thing, which is really important, is that it's just much faster and more performant than the previous version, GPT-4 Turbo. In the speed test, they say it's twice as fast. We've played with it at Glue. We can talk about that in a minute. And it feels 10 times as fast. It is much faster. But it's the combination of all of three of these things that really makes some magical experiences possible. Because when you increase the speed of processing, you can now actually have conversations with it in a much more natural way. Before, it was the models were just too slow, so there'd be a long delay after every prompt. Yeah. So now, like you showed, it can do things like you point the camera at a blackboard or something with math equations on it, and it can walk you through how to solve that problem. Or two people can be talking and it does real-time translation. You know, there's that old saying that every Star Trek technology eventually becomes true. They've just basically invented the whole natural language, real-time universal translator.
Yeah.
So anyway, so those are some interesting use cases, but I just think they're going to be able to unleash a whole lot of new applications. And if they're metering the usage of the models and providing the best dev tools, I think there is a business model there.
And this thing is moving so fast. They're in like Leonardo DiCaprio mode. Every 2 years, they throw the old model away. Okay, let's keep...
Just one point on that is there are a whole bunch of startups out there that were creating virtual customer support agents. And they've been spending the last couple of years working on trying to make those agents more conversational, quicker, more responsive. I think their product roadmaps just became obsolete. Now, that's not to say there isn't more work for them to do in workflow in terms of integrating the AI with customer support tools and doing that last mile of customizing the model for the vertical specific problems of customer support. But my guess is that hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D just went out the window. And probably this is the best time to be creating a customer support agent company. If you're doing it 2 years ago, 5 years ago, your work has just like been... Well, key thing to understand is, where does model innovation end and your innovation begin? Because if you get that wrong, you'll end up doing a bunch of stuff that the model will just obsolete in a few months.
I think you're totally right. I think that's such a really important observation. That's why I think the incentive for these folks is going to be to push this stuff into the open source. Because if you solve a problem that's operationally necessary for your business, but it isn't the core part of your business, what incentive do you have to really keep investing in this for the next 5 and 10 years to improve it? You're